Well, welcome to the 7th Spotlight Series with the museum, the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center. There's been a lot that has been happening since our last Spotlight show, so we're going to try to bring you up to date on those events. With me tonight, we have the Museum Learning Center Executive Board member and Chairman, Robert Wolk, the Executive Board member and Public Relationships Director, Rich Rebecki. We have our architect, Steve Bacon, and our project manager, Bill Lurk. So thank you, and welcome, guys, and thank you for being here tonight. We have a lot of information to discuss and also to update our viewers and our friends out there. So let's start with Robert. I know that we have purchased the Ketting building. Have the people that are currently renting the space in the buildings, have they been brought up to speed on that or been informed?
Yes, we have notified. We've met with them, and our place calls to them. They are well aware of what's going on. We've had trouble making contact with one person, but they were all on 30-day notices.
And so they have plenty of time to
right.
get their ducks in a row. Right.
So everybody said they're going to be out by the end of the month, or shortly thereafter. We may have to give the Southeast Missouri Action Agency a little bit more time to get built out at their location they're trying to move into and get their stuff moved. But shortly after the end of the month, we should be ready to go.
So we really don't want to cause them any hardship. We want to give them plenty of notice. Exactly. And we want to, make sure that they have a location to continue their businesses. So that's a very high priority, I'm sure, for all of us.
It is. We want to work with them. We want to be very respectful of their time frame and what they've got to do to get to a new location. It's just a matter of keeping Bill and his crew under control until we can get to that point.
That's right, and it's taken us a long time to get to this point where we can actually purchase the building and we're ready to move forward. So that's the big story, right? Is that we've been waiting and we've got everything in process, so it's time to move.
Right.
So, and they were aware of that. They knew what was coming down.
They knew it.
Right. So,
and they've been very receptive to it and was congenial with what we had to say. So not a problem.
Very good. So let's move on to the new news. Okay, so what has been happening since our last Spotlight Series show? And I will let Steve Bacon kind of lead the conversation first off as far as what have you been doing, and then we'll go to Bill.
Sure. At our last meeting here, we really hadn't spent any time in the building other than just a quick walkthrough to try and get our bearings on everything. But since then, we have been in there numerous times, taking measurements, documenting structure, equipment like heating and cooling equipment and the plumbing and the various lines. And it's all an effort to document the parts of the building that we want to reuse and work with, so that we can get the best layout possible for the Museum and Learning Center. And it's really hard to get much of a feel for exactly how everything's going to lay out until we have a picture of the whole building. If anybody has been in there until now, or up until about this point, it's subdivided into lots of little spaces, and it's really hard to get a feel for the whole building from inside the building, just because you can't see anywhere.
Well, Steve, I have to tell you something. At the end of the last Spotlight Series, we walked through actually the last museum meeting. They gave us a tour, and I'm like, what in the heck are they going to do with all of this?
Yeah,
seriously, there's a lot of walls that need to come down, and there's a tremendous amount of space, but like to put that into a magical museum center, I can't see it yet. I'm sure you can.
Well, it's starting. Yeah, it's really starting to come together. I never had any doubt that it wouldn't. But it's a lot easier to see how it's going to happen now that Bill and his crew have gotten some of the non-structural stuff out of the way. But what that's letting us do is get a better look at the condition of the various structural elements, so that we know very early in the process whether the floor joists are adequate for a certain load or for a certain use in a certain area, whether the supporting walls are in good shape or not, and just a better understanding of what kind of clear areas we have inside, and that's coming together pretty well. I'll say this: either because the lot was an odd shaped or for some other reason, there are not very many 90-degree corners in that building.
Really?
And it's not very apparent from the street, but when you start measuring things, there's some funny angles in there. And so it takes some time, and especially it's harder to see those things when the building's all subdivided up on the inside. So we've been spending some time trying to track all of those things down and verify what the structure is. And what we'll be doing with that is one of the things is we'll have a kind of a template that shows what space is available in the basement on the first floor and on the second floor, where the non-movable walls are. Mm-hmm. And that will start to let us and the committee and Darrow's and everybody start to do some brainstorming about how to really lay things out inside and what is there really room for, and do we have extra room in this spot or not. So that's one of the goals that this process gets us towards. The other one is there's a lot of HVAC equipment down there. There's electrical all over the place. There's plumbing in the places where we need it, and if we can reuse any of those things, we'd like to, but it's like with the building, we just want to inventory what's there, see what kind of shape it's in, see if we can reuse it, and if so, what would be the best purpose for that individual equipment. So once we get a little bit further along, we will invite our structural and mechanical electrical engineers also to review what we've done, but then also go through the building and verify that the structure, is sound or needs some reinforcement, or if we want to do certain things in a certain area, we might need to beef things up. So we're kind of still in the information gathering stage, but as we gather information, a lot of it becomes a lot easier to imagine.
Hey, Steve, if you would comment on the type of structure, because I've been in a lot of those old structures in the bricklaying process and in remodel on buildings. Yeah. But this one's unique. The span that and the way they built it, I think is unique. Would you not?
I would agree. I am a little surprised getting in there, not finding more columns and beams on the inside, right, supporting some of these longer spans. I think it's technically two separate buildings side by side with a brick wall down the middle. All the exterior walls and the wall down the middle are at least three brick widths thick. So it's just, they're solid brick walls, they're structural walls all on their own. And as you said, we've got some very nice clear areas. I think the one building is 32 feet and the other one is 36 feet across. And those are pretty much all open on the inside. Now, we may need to augment the structure a little, especially today, the codes that we need to design to and the kind of uses that we're talking about for the first floor and the second floor probably involve a lot more weight and movement than what was anticipated when the buildings were originally built. So it's possible we'll have to be doing some reinforcing or helping the structure out a little bit to be sure that it's up to whatever we want to do on those floors. But overall, until we start introducing lots of or any columns and beams, there's not a lot down there that to work around. So that's good, and it's you're right. I was surprised that you've got 30-foot clear spans in there.
I was amazed the way they constructed the building. It's amazing.
And when you walk around on the floors, you don't know that you're on a floor that spans 30 feet either. They're very solid. It's good, sturdy construction.
I would anticipate that a grocery store with as much weight and the equipment they had in there had more weight than we're going to introduce to it with a museum.
That could be in reality, and one of the things that will be interesting about this is that today a structural engineer can go to one of several tables and look up a certain structural member, whether it's a steel joist or a particular piece of lumber, a 2x10 or 2x12 or 3 2x12s put together, And the chart will show exactly how long it can span with whatever weight load you want to impose on top. Well, this was built at a time when the lumber sizes were not as standard as they are today. They're thicker and they're deeper than, you know, a 2 by 12 is almost actually 2 inches by 12 inches, and they're not anymore.
Yeah.
So there will have to be some actual figuring done by the structural engineers to see what each of these is actually capable of. And it won't surprise me if it comes back much higher than it ever needed to be in the past. But as building codes have emphasized safety more and more, especially safety of the public in a public building with a lot of people, those requirements have gone up over time. And so although I'm sure it was overbuilt, it may not quite be overbuilt enough. So,
Sure.
But that'll be something for people to figure out, and we've got them available. That's one of the things that we will be doing, is checking through those.
Well, we're expecting a lot of people to come to this museum center.
Yeah, I know. We'll be calculating a full load for all the time.
Good.
But anyway, that process is going well. It's I wouldn't say it's ahead of schedule, but we haven't lost any time. We knew it was subdivided into lots of spaces and had taken that into account up front. But what we're finding now is that very many of those walls are not structurally necessary, and so we may be able to remove some of them and give us better idea about what kind of space is really available and how it plays out.
So I saw a lot of cubby holes whenever I went through the tour, and I'm sure, Bill, you can give us some information about some of that that's coming down right now, huh?
A lot of us came down. We are on our third construction dumpster. We start out with two 30 cubic yard dumpsters. We boosted that up to a 40 because we got so much stuff we were removing. We pretty much took, I'd say if you look at the front of the building, like Steve said, is divided in two buildings. The one on the left, we pretty much opened it up to its original ceilings. We found the original plaster still in pretty good shape. We found some interesting things in the back of the building. We got to this one wall that we removed. Behind it is an old stage drop of like a movie theater. And Bob said, he come in, he told us that they used to show, it was the first black and white silent movie theater there. And the old backdrop of the theater is still there. And you can see the stage where there was up on a raised platform, and you can kind of visualize where the people used to sit. So that was pretty interesting. We found the original elevator, which is hand operated with a rope and a brake. It still works. I wouldn't recommend riding on it too much, but it looks pretty solid, you know. As far as surprises and construction, everything looks pretty sound. I mean, the roof is in fairly good shape. The walls are structurally really sound. Like Steve said, the overhead beams and stuff that we found were amazing compared to some of the buildings around town. It's pretty well built. I mean, we noticed upstairs all the floors are hardwood, and I had a contractor come in the other day. We're looking at probably leaving those existing floors and refinishing them, sanding them. They turn out really nice when you do that. So that's going to be a big savings on, you know, one of the things. And like I said, upstairs, we're probably going to start on it tomorrow. And there's a lot of odd-shaped rooms that don't make any sense or going to work for us. So we're just going to take everything out. Expose that ceiling too, and pretty much see what else we got, you know. And we found a lot more electrical panels than we actually need in the building, so we're going to probably have to remove a lot of those, because I think over the years when they would come in and they want a space, well, we're going to make you a space, so you got to have your own electric, so they got their own panel. And we found 5 meters, which we don't really need, you know, going forward with this. So all that's going to be addressed.
So you'll come down to 1 meter for the
Yes.
whole existing?
Yes, because it's the same,
It's one
everything's
business,
it's
right,
gonna be
it's-
one complete business. And like Robert said, all the tenants have been advised, one of them is in the process of moving out, he said he'd be out by the end of the month. The other one, they're aware of it, because they hear us over there knocking things around, trying to keep the boys from knocking holes in their wall. But things are coming apart, and Steve's getting a great idea of what the building looks like and what we can do with it.
Do you want to acknowledge the boys and who's working with you on this project?
Two very energetic boys. I mean, you take two 16-year-old boys right now, and you can keep them away from their cell phones and taking a break. These guys are unbelievable. They get in there, they're eager to come to work, they're telling their buddies, they're making summer money and they're enjoying it, and now half of their buddies want to come to work there. So you give a 16-year-old a sledgehammer and say, you can tear that up, and he's the happiest can be.
It's like a new weight program.
Yeah,
New
they're having-
endurance training program.
they're-
Hey, it's
they're
going to make that
get-
football team a little bit stronger, right?
They're
now?
getting to use hand tools, and we just purchased some reciprocating saws, and I brought one in today, and I showed them how to tear the sheetrock apart, and they just thought that was great, and they were ripping walls apart. Two of them are having a lot of fun, I can tell you that.
They went through most of Bill's tools that he brought in.
Went through meaning they've destroyed them?
Well, they
destroyed
broke
some
a
of them.
sledgehammer, but that's no big deal.
Wore your
So are
wheel
they
out on your
moving too
wheelbarrow.
fast, Bill?
Do what?
Are they moving a little too fast?
They're doing pretty good, aren't they, Robert?
Yeah, we don't want to slow them down. They're doing
Give
great.
me about another month, then see if you walk through there, see if there's a lot.
I'm anxious to go back and see what they've done, for sure.
It's opened up quite a bit.
Yes.
It's more room than what you think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
in that
that's
building.
Well, I've been impressed so far with, not just with what you're getting done, but that you're doing it neatly. Everything's cleaned up
Oh,
at the
yeah,
end of the
at
day, and
I
there's
say
no
this.
collateral damage anywhere, and,
No, they're
yeah,
great
it seems
about-
like it's going very well.
No, they're good about that.
Yeah.
Tell them once, and in the end, they're like, they don't want to leave, because they're saying, well, we're going to finish this before we leave, and they don't mess around, and they do a great job. I give them credit for being that young, for doing what they're doing.
Well, that's credit. That's credit to the leader, and that's credit to probably their parents who make them do a job well done and finished at home, right?
Only, like I said, the only surprise we found was the theater, but then as I was looking through some of the things upstairs, I found some old journals from 1905, and I got to thinking about it. Well, maybe somebody I know could be in this register for, I guess it was a store, it was a general store at the time. So I found that my grandpa went in there in March of 1905 and bought a sack of corn for 10 cents. And he came back in August and bought a sack of candy, a sack of flour for 25 cents.
1905, my grandparents were born in 1902.
Well,
and
my
so-
dad wasn't even born yet.
Oh, my gosh.
This was which was pretty interesting to find
Yeah.
this out. But there's probably 9 journals upstairs that I found that I just looked at the one, and I went through the other ones. But it was pretty interesting to find that kind of information out.
So those were left to the museum as well,
The
Paul?
Ketting family actually donated those to the museum,
So that'll be really
along with
interesting. Yeah.
some other artifacts that
Oh,
they
yeah.
left in there. A lot of old hand tools, bricklaying tools, carpenter tools. They donated those, some uniforms.
Yeah.
So they had a collection of stuff, and they said, this is going to the museum, and left it
Oh,
for
that's
us,
pretty
which
cool.
is really neat.
That's really
So,
nice, yeah. So that was fun for you to discover your grandparents.
I thought it
and-
was great. I never
right.
knew that
Yeah.
grandfather. But just an interesting fact that what they paid for different things back then. I noticed through there, if you paid your bill on time, if it was over $3, you got 2-cent discount, which would have been great to see.
So let's kind of fast forward that. How many of you guys can calculate what it is today? Like the cash exchange or the money exchange then, what people were making for a living and what they are making for a living now and the percentages of
Sure.
that? I mean, that's even a big question,
But
isn't it?
1905,
I know.
I don't think anybody in this room would have the ability to key in on that and have an
I know.
accurate description of what a dollar was worth back then.
Yeah.
So,
It's all perspective, right? I always
Yeah.
say it's in perspective, right? Any other stories, Bill, that you want to talk about?
No, it's interesting to taking it apart. There's not as many surprises I thought I was gonna find. Some of the previous work that we did on one of the other buildings downtown, we found a lot of walls that were difficult to remove. In this building, all this stuff has been added probably in the last 15 to 20 years, so a lot of it's modern construction that is pretty easy to remove. It's funny, some of the older construction is harder to remove than some of the modern stuff because it's, they used a lot of oak lumber back then. You can't get the stuff tore apart, where the newer stuff is all pine lumber and sheetrock. That stuff comes apart pretty easy.
So when you get down to the basis of what that building is about, you're finding brick 3 layers deep, you're finding hardwood floors, what else are you
Yes.
finding? Steel beams?
Well, steel
To
beams that
support the ceiling?
we never thought was in there until most of the building has drop ceilings, and what they did, they tried to hide everything. Well, when you tear all that out, you see all the good structure that the building was actually built of.
And you'll let us see that in the museum? You're not gonna cover that back
No,
up,
no,
surely not?
those won't get covered back up.
Right,
You'll
it's
see all
beautiful,
the-
that's what we saw in the DeBerg Center,
Yeah,
it
you
was
won't
just
see all
beautiful
that stuff.
construction.
And then there's some walls upstairs I was messing with this afternoon. I think we're gonna expose all the brick, and because, well, actually, when Steve's dad started his architectural firm, one of the little rooms upstairs was his dad's first office in town, and one of the walls was the brick exposed, so we think we're gonna take the rest of that plaster off those walls and expose that brick, because it does give a neat backdrop to a room. And all those rooms have hardwood flooring, that if you walk in there now, you just shake your head like, what's gonna happen here? Well, you sand those down and refinish them, and it's amazing how great, nice they look. So that upstairs is gonna look nice when it's done, with all the character, all the stuff that's in it.
Yeah, it's gonna go back to an authentic, for its period, type of construction, but the materials are all in good shape. So.
And some of the things I did find, the windows upstairs, I've never seen a steel framed window. And the second building that was built, the first one, there's 2 windows in the wall that they just left. Well, those you can open because they never been exposed to weather, but the ones that are existing outside, most of them are rusted shut, and we're trying to get them open so we can get our debris out. But those things I never seen a window so strong. I was like, where'd they come up with this at? This is in the 1900s.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing what they had, or how they built this stuff. And it's rusted shut, but the ones inside that didn't get the elements,
Right.
they're working just like they're brand new.
So will you be able to rehab those old buildings, or those old windows
I'd
that are
say
exposed to
most
the
of the
outside?
exterior windows are gonna be removed because most of them are single pane, they're outdated. I think we're gonna go with all new insulated 1-inch glass windows, the insulated window that make it a lot better, because it all needs updating, because you can hear a lot of wind noise and stuff
Sure.
up there. It all needs to be changed out. Stuff like that will, be beneficial to change all that out versus all the structural stuff, because like Steve said, back when they built this stuff, everything was true 2-inch by 12-inch. It wasn't 1.5 by 11 3/4. And all this stuff is rough, sawed, it's heavy. It's unbelievable what they did, how they come up with this stuff, some of the stuff, the building. And we found that, the 2 buildings meet, they cut an opening, and it's probably, I'd say at least a 20-foot span, wouldn't you say, that one opening? Well,
I think I just measured that.
They constructed a beam in there and put a center support, and then on top, they built a brick wall on top of that, so it carries that brick on up. And it's amazing what they come up with without the structural
Yeah.
knowledge that you have now.
Mhm. Yeah,
And-
it's a 23-foot span.
Yeah, and there's brick on top of it.
Mhm.
And then the I-beams that are going across to make it an open span tie into that wall.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
really neat construction for that.
And it wasn't, back then, there was no welding, it was all hot torch, and they put the big power rivets in, they smashed them together, and it had to be a feat to do all this stuff, especially in St. James. This wasn't in St. Louis, where they probably had more stuff to work with. This were the
Yeah.
local guys doing this stuff, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
what
it
they
is.
did.
They're good buildings. They'll be
Yeah.
a good home for the Learning Center.
Oh, I
for
agree.
sure. Yeah.
And Jan, once we get all of that out of there, then it'll be easier for Guy and Steve and all the people to get in there and visualize what they want. By the way, Guy was visiting with you today. Guy and
Yeah.
Doris come by to visit where we were at.
Yeah.
I think they met both of you guys down there, did they not?
Yes.
Yeah, that was my first opportunity to spend any time with them and hear kind of what their vision is for what's happening. I get why everybody's excited now.
Yeah.
They've got some very, very unique ideas, and I think this is really going to be top notch.
And they've spent their entire life doing this, as Rich and I have talked to them many times. This is what they've done all their life. So they've been around museums. They've seen how it's done incorrectly. They're not having anything to do with that, are they?
No.
It's
No.
going to be done first class.
And that was part of our discussion today, was that we really do need, once we have these drawings of the building shells and what's, what has to stay and what we can remove, we need as many good minds together to talk through how this is going to work, what should go where, what could go where, and not only for having the best possible arrangement when we open, but also to be flexible down the line as things change, as either more displays become available or things in the museum industry change. So I think I think we've got a good building to do that with. There's a lot of good open space, and it's well suited for flexibility, like we're talking about. But I was really encouraged by their enthusiasm about wanting to have everyone together and really talk through what's the best way to lay this out and make it work for a long time.
And in addition to that, they've worked with people who set up professional displays for the companies. That is their profession, is going into museums and designing and installing displays. So they are in tune with bringing those people in to make this the best.
This will not be a unilateral decision by Guy. He already has a couple of, they're in Illinois, right?
Yeah.
He's got a couple of companies in Illinois that he's extremely fond of. And he says you get what you pay for, and they don't come cheaply, but they will tell you exactly. That's an 8-foot vertical display cabinet, and that should be 2-3 foot round ones, and this should be plexiglass, while this should be the type of glass that doesn't let light. It's got the UV filtering in it that doesn't change color, but doesn't allow the UV rays to penetrate the glass, and it is pretty exciting. To finally have them, get in contact with you, and now you can see there's no flies on this gentleman. He's got a vision, and yeah.
Well,
So I know
think
that we've talked about 2 buildings and then the space in between the buildings too, and Mike, there's all this space that is the alley between the buildings that can be used for.
Oh yeah, when you think of it's almost an endless. The possibilities are almost endless. And it was last month that or the day after last month, we bumped into Steve. He was already over in the building, and, you know, we were talking about, you know, how we would connect eventually you know, the hair salon with the main building, and do we stay at what, you know, like just a corridor, or do we go up 2 stories and bring the front facade over? And, you know, well, why not utilize you're not gonna drive on this space, why not just expand the building out? I mean, there's so many different possibilities that it can happen in a logical sequence,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, it'll be interesting once things are up and running and we can all get a feel for the traffic and the demand and just the interest level generally. I think that will help guide any decisions about what to do next, as it should. But if there is strong demand and a lot of interest, there are a lot of different directions that could be gone between the 2 buildings that we've been talking about mostly tonight. But yeah, between the drive between the 2, the salon building, and there's quite a bit of property to the rear.
To the rear, yeah.
So your first priority is to get what section of that building up and going? You want to define that for the public?
Well, if we're talking about the 2 joined buildings, I think it's 350 and 360 is the addresses. Right now, I understand that our job is to get that entire building cleaned out and functional. Now, how much of it is going to be displays versus meeting rooms or offices or gift shop, we still need to determine what that mix is going to be. But as I understand it, that those 2 buildings will be either ready to open as museum and learning space with the required administrative space that goes with it, or sort of what we might call a white box space that's ready for whatever comes next.
Sure.
So if we find that we don't need quite all 11,000 square feet to get things up and going in a way that really is in the way that we want to, we can leave a space available for future expansion, remodeling, or repurposing. But as far as I understand it, we're going to have all 3 floors and the roof up to par and ready to go for whatever the ultimate arrangement is going to be.
Then, Jim, we would actually like to say phase 2 would be looking at the next building and the alleyway. And phase 3, if demand exists for that, would be going out the back and going towards South Gabourey Street.
Lots of space there.
Yes.
What we purchased with the purchasing of the Ketting building is that entire, almost call it a block of space going between.
The section between the 2 streets. It's from one street, which is Market Street.
Back to
Back to Gabourey.
Gabourey.
So all the ground between there is owned by the museum. It was owned by the Kenny family and now is owned by the museum. So in the early stages, we'd have plenty of room to park buses and for vehicle traffic. And then in later stages, as the town progresses and we grow into this and we build additional parking spaces for buses, we'll use that however is needed. But Steve is already looking at that in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. No efforts being put towards phase 2 or 3 at this time.
Just something
No,
that's
but knowing those things are possible, we
Sure.
will try to arrange things within those 2 buildings so that we don't preclude ourselves from going in one of those 2 directions. So it's good to have that much advance notice
Right.
about something and forethought into
Right,
it. So.
primarily because we had so many utilities coming into the side of that building that,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you at some point, I might as well do it now and
Okay.
make you a public record. That spider nest of electrical lines in the front of the building, and then you think that they just meet there, but they don't. They then find their way to the side of the building. I know little about the construction business, but I do know it's not like the barber shop. You don't cut and snip, and then you know, what's gonna happen? I mean, I have no doubt that the inside of this building is going to be spectacular, and I have no doubt that the exterior is going to make even the naysayers. I remember once upon a time when I was looking at this building, but what a turnoff to see that spider work, but it's not our call, right? I mean, we can only suggest to the people that have all of these wires that, I mean, do we
Well,
suggest we'll
no,
help
we
you
can-
move them, or?
No, they'll move them, I would anticipate, Steve.
It really, and we haven't spent a lot of time getting into that, but when I talked earlier about having a mechanical and electrical engineer reviewing existing conditions, that will be part of it, and we'll begin to know for sure which of those lines that are coming down to the building are part of a service that we don't need anymore. And if we don't need it anymore, then I think there's a very good chance we can have them removed.
Right.
But we do need to be sure that they're only serving this building, they're not needed for they don't go on somewhere else, and things of that nature. But once that can be determined, then I don't think, we certainly don't want anything extraneous on the building if we don't have to. And I wouldn't think that the utility company does either. They're not interested in having wires out that don't do anything. So it does appear that there was an addition done in the late 80s towards the back of the building where the new elevator is, and the entrance from the rear, from the rear parking lot. That looks to have had a much more modern and fuller electrical service installed. And once we get a better feel for what the demand is going to be on the whole building, we may be able to just work everything off of that service and eliminate all the rest of them. When we're sure what we can do with that and start getting it switched over, then some of those things can probably come off of the building. And, I'm sure we won't be able to remove everything. There's a lot of lines that just run up and down the street on poles, and a lot of those are there to stay until somebody buries them. But as far as it's quite a display. It's almost a museum in itself
Yeah,
on the outside.
my
of
first
electrical
inclination was
service.
put some plexiglass around it
You
and a
could do
little
that.
sign.
Yeah, and a little placard that says when each one was put in.
Yeah.
And
Well, the Ketting family were here 2 months ago for the Spotlight Show. And I kind of lost count after the number 8, how many different businesses
Oh, yeah.
at
I
one
can't
time or another, sometimes in
Living life
tandem,
for that building.
sometimes 3 different. And there was even a general store there for a while that migrated to groceries that eventually took everything over. But they were talking about, a jewelry store, and I think didn't your dad have
yeah,
an office in
Dad
there?
had some office space.
And there was a dentist up there and a doctor, and the
Mortuary at one time? Did you mention?
caskets were put together. The workbench that's in front of the Lyric wall display. There's those cubbies and workbench. There was a furniture store and a mortuary, and they used those benches to they put furniture together. Then I guess they brought it up with the elevator up to the second floor. Lids were put on caskets and stuff. So I mean this facility has seen an awful lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it comes as no surprise that you found a couple of dozen extra electrical panels.
Well, if it's not held together with brick and steel, the electrical
Plenty.
wire.
Yeah.
There's plenty of wiring,
String
I
them
can tell you that.
Yeah.
This is a little off topic maybe, but and I was surprised to see, well, I'll back up. As we were measuring, I couldn't figure out why one end of the building, we had these very thick brick walls, and then all of a sudden, for a big long span, there was just a real, very light wood wall in there. And then it went back to brick, and this was an area where the floor was couple of feet higher than the other floor. And when it was all still in place, you really couldn't tell what was going on. Since Bill and his crew have been in there and revealed that that was a stage, an elevated stage above, the seating area, which would have been out in where the grocery store was, I was starting to wonder. Now I get the screen that they had painted on the wall to show movies behind it, but do we know what kind of plays they were putting on there, or are there records of what kind of performances happened
We
in
would
there?
have to go to the Ketting family for that, so I have no idea.
Somebody
I think
told
that's
me that
interesting.
there was a drapery system.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me, as
So,
a
but
stage that would.
they didn't say if the drapes were at the beginning of the stage, so maybe plays were performed on the stage when a movie wasn't being shown, or if the draperies were all the way back
I
against
see,
the
yeah.
wall, and then they were opened up, and I would imagine it would have been one person on a rope on each side, walking it to a hook, and off, somewhere was the piano player. That's why all the Kettings know, or most of the Kettings know how to play the piano and organ, because
Right, that's very true.
they all did that. Well, you read what was being said.
That's interesting.
Silent moving era.
Wish we could go back and figure out really how it was. I mean, we might want to look back in history and just kind of see the history of the development of theater and movies and all that, and just assume that it was happening here. I mean, St. Genevieve has been around a long time, so.
Well, the journals I found, just the one was pretty interesting. There's 9 others. So I don't know what dates they are, or what, they could be, some of them they could be in the 20s and 40s. My mom couldn't even be in those. I didn't even go into those, but the interesting ones of 1905, it was 6 years before my dad was even born. And it was just interesting to see. I tried to recognize some of the names, and you would think you'd find a Swice and a Jokers and a Bowman or Bowman or even a Wilkes. But anyway, I didn't go really into it that far. It was interesting to see what was in just a little bit I read. But it'd be neat to go back and just see what was going on back then.
And I thought the interesting part was, it says Ketting Building 1910 on the outside, but the journals are showing them in business in 1905. That's where the journal's starting, in 1905.
Right.
So obviously, maybe one of the buildings was built prior to the other building. Maybe they were not built in unison. And they did business out of one until the other was constructed. I don't know that.
Actually, the first of the journal, I didn't really read who owned the company at the time. I was just reading what people were buying, because I don't know who owned it, who they were buying from.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's clear that they weren't built at the same time, because up on the second floor, we've got windows.
There's an offset.
Well, there are several clues, but one of them is there are 2 windows that
Right.
that you think probably look to the outside, and right now they just open into the other building.
Building, yeah.
So.
And those are the ones that are still working, right?
Yes, right, yeah, those are, yeah.
Protected.
If you look at the front of the building to the left must have been built first, because this one has windows facing the other building that would be outside. They had originally been outside. So that building to the right,
The one on the right.
the one on the right, yeah,
Right, it has the outside facing.
has the outside
So it
facing
was
into the
probably
new,
built
yeah.
first. So that's the building where the double door entry is. for-
Right,
for
and then
parking.
if you look in the basement, their structural is different on that side than the newer side. The newer side looked like they beefed it up more for some reason.
And the newer side being 1910.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, absolutely brand new construction.
Well,
Nearly broken in.
in the basement, in the back of the concrete, there's a 1914 carved in, or was put into the concrete when they set it. So, I don't know if that's when that part was built or what was going on.
Yeah.
But that's in that back wall. I found that the other day.
And the original elevator that was in there, what company was that? You looked at it today.
God, it's a simple, Miller, out of St. Louis, Missouri. It was Miller Company, Bill Miller, out of St. Louis, Missouri, and it's got his address, and I don't know if they had a phone number then or not.
There's a placard on that
Yeah,
elevator,
On the
rope
elevator.
elevator. So And it was covered by a wall, which, when Bill turned his kids loose, the wall disappeared. Now you
Now we
can
can
see
see
it.
it, now you can see it.
Yeah, that's really an interesting system.
It is.
Flywheel that drives that, you get it going and it really, it
Because
does a
if
lot
you
of the work
spin
for
it,
you.
if you pull it hard enough, it'll take off and it'll move itself up by itself until you throw the brake on. Brake's on the opposite side, but,
Well, the counterweights that are in there
Yeah.
are enormous, that run it up and
You
down the
gotta
side, so.
preserve that, you really have to
Oh,
preserve
it's
it. I
staying.
would love for
Yeah,
it
I
to
for
use
one
I
would
know.
like to even spotlight, I mean,
Right,
pardon the pun, but I would spotlight it.
the
and I would
gears showing how they
Show the
work.
gears and how they work. I mean, that's a visual lesson.
Mhm.
You know, how one gear fits in, one tooth fits into the next, and as one rotates, and you need different sizes and
How
why. I
did
mean,
you take those out over at the Duberg Center? How did you guys get those things out of there? Because that
That
had
was
to be
done
an
a day I
enormous job.
wasn't there, and they took them out quite quickly, from what I heard. It was more or less a cut and let her drop.
Oh, boy.
And it didn't, nothing broke or anything,
Yeah.
but,
Because the components are still laying around. I mean, the ones you got upstairs in the Duberg, there's some of the
that's where,
components.
that's where those gears, somebody asked me today about
Yeah.
those, and I said, I thought we threw them away, but they're
No.
upstairs.
Yeah, they're upstairs in the Duberg.
That's right.
they're just laying there, but they're not being displayed.
No, they've been cleaned and they're part of the decoration. upstairs
okay,
in
The
the
okay.
back
Duberg.
wall, as you go in
Okay.
there, you can see them. Actually, the old door to the elevator is hanging on that wall.
Right, mounted on the wall, but the
Right.
bull gear
True.
is back on the back side.
Right.
So,
But this one over here at the Ketting building is a lot bigger than the one that was in the Rozier building.
yeah.
A lot bigger system over here for some reason.
And we were told that that was the first elevator in St. Genevieve, along with the first theater in St. Genevieve. So there's a lot of first in the building.
Pretty exciting,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
In the first History and Science Museum.
And the
There are
first
there are
town
other
west of the
museums, but
Mississippi,
there's
right?
no other History and Science Museum.
We're gonna claim a lot of firsts in this
That's
town,
right.
I think. So let's talk about a little bit more of how this museum is gonna be set up. Are we wanting to move on to some other questions? Or you guys feel like you've exhausted what's happening in the building? Or do you have any other information that you wanna share before we move on?
Well, I could save them some time and energy. I don't need an office. I will settle for a little wet bar in the corner somewhere, and I'll stock it myself.
You're so
We can put you on the
flexible,
elevator.
Rich.
Yeah.
Could we get you to run the elevator?
Yeah,
At the same time?
yeah, give me a little pilled bark type hat and, and a vest.
Any other comments? No? So we talked about how this museum is going to be set up possibly, and is it going to talk about from day moving backwards or a certain time moving forward? We have had that conversation, Robert. You want to kind of talk about?
Well, that's a work in progress, and I think that as Guy continues to see the area opened up, and he's walking through with these gentlemen and talking about it, I think that is working in his mind, and he met with them today, and I believe he was mulling that over in his mind as you guys were talking. So
Yeah.
it's a work in progress. We thought we knew how we wanted to run that, but I think Guy might have different thoughts at this point and seeing it opened up and seeing where he might go with that. So I don't think we're ready to comment one way or the other. I think he will formulate that as he gets these people and the professional people that set up displays and they talk about what their vision is for the museum and how they want to tell that story. I think they'll formulate that idea after they get to that point.
Sounds good. That sounds good. So in keeping the current museum open, Rich, you and Stephanie have been pretty busy in trying to connect with some of the other activities that are going on in St. Genevieve and to be kind of present to those
Yeah,
things.
it's business as usual. I mean, people come in and we're getting an increase in people coming in, and they ask because they've either walked past or they've seen what's happening in the Ketting building, and we're getting the same reaction. I'm surprised you're not packaging things up and getting ready for the move. And No, we're gonna make a seamless transition, you know, when the time comes. So we're doing things as if there isn't a project going on. Stephanie has overseen not one, but three new displays. Our local historian came in the other day and he said, this is amazing. He said, I can't remember the last time I saw a new display in here. He said, and in the past couple of months, he said, there's three. We have a war display. There's artifacts from British, U.S., and German World War I and World War II headgear. We've got a doughboy uniform that was in one of the skirmishes in France because we were able to identify with the help of the War Museum in Kansas City. The hat that was with the uniform was only given to people who landed in France during World War I. We have a bicentennial display. She and our Stephanie and our intern Susie discovered, going through boxes and stuff, flags and banners from the bicentennial. So now we have a bicentennial display. And she just finished, with the help of one of our executive board members, Bob Roth. She was able to, and he's associated with Mississippi Lime. She's got a display on mining. Some photograph, some articles, some early hand tools, and there's even a display of mortar inside the glass, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And people are coming in, and we say the same thing to everybody. It's an eclectic space, but what we have similar items on display next to themselves. So there's continuity and unity in this eclectic array of items. We've been in contact with the two school systems to develop a home base for community service. Kids that are part of the National Honor Society need to do a community service. Graduating seniors need some community service hours. We thought it was a great idea to approach the school systems and say, hey, we're right here. We've got plenty of things to do, from simple maintenance and cleaning of the glass and stuff to we have to document everything. First of all, we have to verify, before we move, we have to verify what we have under glass belongs to us.
Right.
And we got to separate that stuff that we physically own, because we've got the documentation that says it was donated. And then we're contacting family members of paperwork that says the item is on loan. And we're asking them, do you want it back? If so, please come and get it, because we don't want to be responsible for it through the move. If you want to donate it, please come in, and Stephanie has created a document, through the help of Bob Mueller. He gave us some, I guess it's state paperwork.
Sure.
So other museums use, if it's good enough for other museums, it's got to be good enough for us, right?
Sure.
And Jan, we've actually joined in with a community or a museum group that they share information like on insurance and how they share displays and those
Yeah, the
documents
Alliance
that
group.
they have. Yes. So we've actually joined that group so that we've got access to that.
Matter of fact, tomorrow, Stephanie will be contacting the chair of this Alliance group, because we have to know, where do we buy our souvenirs from? Who's the distributor? Are these going to be imported from China and Taiwan, or are they going to be made in the good old US of A? We need direction, we need guidance. It's easy to figure out clothing, but it's the other stuff, like the Christmas ornaments, like the keychains, like the the little trinkets that you can, we're going to have having the 501c3 designation, we're going to be able to underwrite school districts from the inner city, low-income areas. But we should have something that, those kids could, afford too. We need the under $1 item as much as the, the $20, $30, $40 golf shirt type of deal. So we're looking into, through the Alliance, that we've got the mentoring program going on. Susie, our intern, came in first, to be part of the mentoring, just to, pick our brains and stuff, and it led to the internship, and now she actually works for us on a part-time basis. We met an 8th grade student from the R2 system. Her mom brought her by and said she'd like to get a jump start on community service hours, and, she contacted the school. The school said, well, we know the museum is operating 7 days a week. Why don't you go talk to them? So we've got this cute little 8th grade girl. She was doing data entry stuff and verifying what was already, we gave her a laptop. We set her up at her desk. She was in what we call the little office area, and she was on cloud 9. And she feels important, and she's helping us out with work. We've touched base with the Boy Scouts of America, who one day the Girl Scouts with the Boy Scouts will have the same qualifications for merit badges. So we asked for the official paperwork. So some of us that are on the board can go through a background check and become what the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts consider counselors.
Okay.
And then that way we have a center that kids can come, even if they come and visit the facility with their parents, they show their ID card, we show we're a counselor, and we can do something while they're at that visit to work toward a badge. So I mean, we're treating over there as if nothing is going on over there.
And continuing to work on projects that you really think are valuable to
Sure.
the youth of today, and also the museum learning center,
And
to bring
Jan,
interest in there.
I laugh when he says business as usual. There's no business as usual.
No, it's
That thing
stepped
sat
up.
there for
Yeah, it has
years,
stepped
never
up.
changed.
Right.
And now they're doing something every day. There's something exciting going on in there, so.
Currently, it's become business as usual.
Well, but that is just bringing in new blood and new ideas and new interest, and people who have been exposed to museums from Boston and from other places, really. So,
Agreed.
I mean, it's a collective interest from those who have joined this community and those who have been a part of it and just all of a sudden got really excited about history. So we're down to 1 minute, gentlemen. We have 1 minute to tell them anything else you want to tell them about the Museum Learning Center or the ideas. Go ahead, Bob.
Could I just say that we really appreciate the people who are dropping into the museum and actually leaving donations for this project. We've had the corporations, but we've not really attached to any individuals to say. And there's people dropping in and leaving donations for the museum towards this project. And I think that we want to say thank you to them people, along with all the businesses that are helping us out. Thank you to those individuals, and invite anybody to come by, visit the museum, and if they see that they are interested in that, help us out.
Can they go over and check out what's going on in the renovation yet, or not?
I would say not at
Not
this
yet.
time.
It's a
I
pretty
don't
dangerous
think
place,
it's a
huh, Bill?
safe
We're still
Yeah.
using our sledgehammers, so
Bill with a
maybe
sledgehammer,
we should wait
no,
on that.
we can't use that. The liability
Yeah,
don't
it's
cover that.
It's a hard
Right.
hat area. They can come and
Well-
visit us in the museum.
That is our time, gentlemen.
Okay.
We have to say goodnight because we surely don't want to go beyond our time. So
No, we
Thanks,
don't.
Jen.
thank you for being here, and I look forward to meeting with you again, Steve, because you're going to
Sure.
have a lot more information next time.
Yes.
And Bill, you keep those sledgehammers going.
As soon as next month, maybe.
Man, we are going at it. So
There will be
it's
news.
exciting. I think people know that this is going to happen, and hopefully some of those who've been holding back on donations will start to say, hey, this is going to be fun. So
Thank you, Jan.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Jan.
it.
All righty.
Thank you, Jan.
Excellent job, as usual.
All right, we'll talk soon. Good night.